I really think that there's so much misinformation. We've never really seen anything like it. I mean, I've been covering wars now for 35 years, and I have never seen people with their nails done in the Ukrainian flag, right? I mean, we're being corralled into this box where we either have to hate Vladimir Putin and believe everything evil that's said about him and love Ukraine, and there's no in between. And that reminds me a lot of, you're either, a white supremacist, or you go with the Democrat narrative on everything under the sun. Although, these days it's hard to believe anything that our leaders tell us, because they've lied about COVID, they lied about Russia collusion, they lied about the Ukraine impeachment trial, and there's so much more going on in Ukraine that nobody is talking about. You see such dishonesty when it comes to the history of Ukraine. You see dishonesty when it comes to the Azov battalion, which is funded by the US and NATO. I mean, you can find pictures of them online holding up the NATO flag and the swastika at the same time. Their own emblem contains the black sun of the occult, which was a Nazi SS emblem. And it also contains the sideways, lightning insignia of the SS. I mean, this is on throughout the Ukrainian military. You can see that black sun of the occult on their body armor, even on the female soldiers who are paraded in front of the world as being, such an example of Ukraine's independence and spirit and nobility. Even they are wearing the black sun of the occult. And, the White House wants you to believe, well, this doesn't matter, it's just a small number of troops. It's not true. The Azov battalion has been murdering its way through eastern Ukraine. Yeah. We don't want to admit this. This was why Crimea voted for independence. This is why Crimea wanted to be with Russia. Because we in the media, in the Western media and in the West, won't acknowledge the reality of what's gone on. Western Ukraine backed the Nazis. It was a headquarters for the Nazi SS. The CIA under Alan Dulles actually gave immunity from prosecution to the Nazis of Ukraine from the Nuremberg trials. So there's a long history of the United States and our intelligence agencies funding and arming Nazis in Ukraine. These are not like new neo-Nazi groups that sprung up. These are the actual Nazis from the Second World War, who, if you go back to the Nuremberg trials, said that they were planning for a 1,000-year Reich. And so you have to really wonder, as you look at this, when you know that the CIA sponsored the color revolution in Ukraine in 2013 and 14, that they selected Ukraine's leaders, go to Victoria Nuland's leaked phone conversation where she and the US ambassador are deciding who can lead Ukraine. I mean, there's as much interference here as you could possibly imagine before you even get to Hunter Biden, Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, and Mitt Romney, and all of their children who are employed, who earn millions from Ukrainian gas companies.
Yeah, you are pointing, pardon me, to a real credibility crisis for our leaders. I want to let Karen Turk jump in.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the fact that President Zelensky is Jewish, and I don't know exactly how this factors in, but there's some very interesting points in what you're saying. And
what troubles me about the moment that we're in is that we have such a selective and a narrow reading of history. President Zelensky may be Jewish, but he's not the only one in this who suffered during the Second World War, whose ancestors suffered, right? I mean, look at Putin. How many relatives did he lose in the siege of St. Petersburg? People don't know their history. They don't know what made Vladimir Putin. And I'm not I'm not defending him. I don't need to defend Vladimir Putin. My job as a journalist is to try to understand what is the truth here. I don't like being lied to. And we're being lied to on an epic scale. When we're told your only choice is you have to be 100% with Zelensky, who's a puppet, who you can find on the internet in black stilettos and leather pants, with shirtless, doing a spoof Dancing with the Stars kind of entertainment video. That's a mock of a Ukrainian group that does this kind of satanic occult type of music video. And I mean, Zelensky was selected like so many of our leaders. And honestly, with big tech and with election fraud these days, we don't know how many leaders all around the world have been selected for us and weren't actually voted in. But what we do know is that there are increasing problems with technology and the digitization of our world. Because look at what's happening with COVID. Look at what has happened globally. We are fighting the same battles all over the world. To pretend that this war is about Russia and Ukraine is just a barefaced lie. If Putin has been warning for 15 years that he is not going to stand by while the globalists take over the world, build bioweapons facilities and whatever else they're doing in Ukraine. Ukrainian oligarchs. Ukraine has been a center of money laundering for, many of the leaders in this country. For how long? Billions of US dollars have been laundered through Ukraine, and we say nothing about it. These are our tax dollars. I mean, before the impeachment trial, had you ever heard of anyone in the United States, us bringing in foreign governments to the White House for anti-corruption training? I mean, does nobody question these things? Why do we not question them? We have an idiot like Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who goes at the impeachment trial and sits there as a lieutenant colonel. He didn't even make colonel. And he's telling the president of the United States what his policy should be. You have a traitor in the form of Maria Yovanovitch, who was Obama's ambassador, who's telling Ukrainian government officials, don't listen to the will of the American people. Don't listen to the election results. We are the true leaders of America. I mean, and then people object when the woman isn't even fired. She's given a cushy job for life at Georgetown University at the expense of the U.S. taxpayer. I mean, there's so much hypocrisy and dishonesty here, and Ukraine is at the center of it all.
You've got a country led by a man who, even before the war, Axios, The Guardian, the Atlantic Council, all of them were reporting that Zelensky, even though he ran on an anti-corruption ticket, has, through the Panama Papers and other such leaks, has stashed his millions offshore like most corrupt oligarchs have. And so even before the war, his corruption was known. And then you fast forward to what he's done over this weekend with the banning of 11 opposition parties. And I want to note at this stage that he banned these opposition parties, including, as you mentioned, Tucker, the second largest in his parliament, while the Nazi elements, and I use the word Nazi, not neo-Nazi, because these are actual Nazis that aren't neo in any sense. They're the continuation of Nazis as we know them and study them in history. And Bandera, the man that they revere, was actually a Nazi, and they've made him into a national hero and icon. The Nazis in Ukraine have not been banned by Zelensky. And so this is a very interesting point, that you've got a man that's, that we're hailing as a democratic icon who's fighting for freedom and democracy in our way of life, banning all opposition parties, controlling this, through the state the media narrative, while refusing not only to ban Nazis, but having, after not banning them, incorporated them into his state as a battalion, formally serves in the Ukrainian National Guard. Now, people say to that in response, yeah, but Majid, there are racists in every country. No, the analogy here is, imagine, Tucker, in America, the KKK had a formal battalion in the US military. That's what we've got with swastikas and Nazi insignia inside the Ukrainian army. And then people would say, well, what do you want to do? Putin invaded their country. Of course, they have to fight. And I find this line of argument absolutely absurd, because the best analogy is with Syria. Now, Putin allying with Nazis in Ukraine to defeat Putin is as absurd as allying with ISIS in Syria to defeat Putin. You've got an extremist, an armed, extreme terrorist militia known as ISIS. None of us ever had any moral difficulty in understanding that Assad was a dictator, that Putin's support for Assad was wrong, but the people opposing him, the jihadists, were also wrong. Why can't we have that moral complexity when it comes to Ukraine?
And keep the UK, and particularly the United States, my country, free. If you're for freedom in Ukraine, you can't try and shut down honest questions in this country or punish people for telling the truth. It's super simple, I would say.
Я знаю, що як журналіст я маю бути об'єктивним, маю бути виваженим для того, щоб повідомляти вам інформацію з холодним серцем, але направду триматися зараз дуже важко, особливо в такий час, і якраз уже нас на Росії називають нацистами, фашистами і так далі. Я дозволю собі зацитувати слова Адольфа Ейхмана, який сказав, що для того, щоб знищити націю, потрібно нищити в першу чергу дітей. Тому що, вбиваючи їхніх батьків, діти виростуть і обов'язково помстяться. Вбиваючи дітей, вони ніколи не виростуть, і нація зникне. Як Збройні сили України не можуть нищити російських дітей, тому що це заборонено правилами війни, і це заборонено різними конвенціями, в тому числі Женевськими. Але я не зі Збройних сил України. І коли мені випаде нагода розправитися з росіянами, я обов'язково це зроблю. Я дотримуюсь, раз ви вже називаєте нацистами, дотримуюсь доктрини Адольфа Ейхмана і зроблю все, що від мене залежить, для того, щоб ні ви, ні ваші діти ніколи не жили на цій землі. Для того, щоб ви відчули, як воно, коли вмирають ні в чому не винні цивільні люди, для того, щоб ви відчули весь біль і страждання, коли ви говорите, а ми не починали війни, це все Путін, ми не хотіли цієї війни. Ми теж її не хотіли, але тепер ви мусите розуміти, що тут йдеться про перемогу українського народу, а не мир. Нам потрібна перемога. І якщо для цього доведеться вирізати всі ваші сім'ї, я буду одним із перших, хто це зробить. Слава нації! І сподіваємось, що такої нації, як Росія і росіяни, ніколи більше не залишиться на цій землі. Тому що це просто виродки, які засмічують цю землю. І якщо в українців є можливість, що вони зараз в принципі роблять, трощити, різати, вбивати, душити москальноту, я сподіваюся, що кожен внесе свій вклад і замочить хоча б одного москаля.
So I'm watching BBC News at 10, and I've got a nice little piece about Ukrainian army training civilians in Ukraine.
Civilians are turning out for weapons training. Lesson over, the guns are returned.
But hold on, can you see that right there?
These are not would-be
That is the symbol
frontline soldiers.
of C. That symbol there is a symbol of C-14, a neo-Nazi group in Ukraine that were famous, or infamous, sorry, for carrying out pogroms against Romani people in Kiev, also attacking left-wing groups as well as LGBTQ groups. Also, they celebrate Hitler's birthday, and this group is presented uncritically on BBC News at 10 by Jeremy Bowen. No mention of any of this.
At least not yet.
I believe that during these times we just learn to be ready. That is what I think. We just
Unreal. Absolutely unreal. The whole world's gone mad.
really